Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. It's time for this week's Know Your Foe episode. We have a great guest. It's Bo Brock of GoPHNX.com to tell us all about the Arizona Cardinals. Bo, how you doing?
Doing well. I think I'm doing better than this team is doing out here in the desert as they're welcoming, I think, a tough challenge, especially with what Lamar Jackson and his Ravens offense was able to accomplish the previous week. Should be a pretty big test for Jonathan Gannon and crew.
All right. Well, I know Ravens fans are hoping so, but why don't you take us through some of the drama this offseason with the Arizona Cardinals and I think really some of the Kyler Murray drama. You know, obviously there's the perception around a lot of the NFL that the Cardinals are tanking, but take us through some of that.
Yeah, and I think, the latter is a little bit of a misconception. And, when you talk about drama, I think it's been a little bit refreshing with the regime change as the organization decided to hit the full reset button for the most part, despite signing Cliff Kingsbury and former GM Steve Keim to contract extensions at that point through 2027 to move off of Steve Keim, who unceremoniously resigned at the end of December, and Cliff Kingsbury was fired on Black Monday. And the team ultimately decided to go with Monty Ossenfort, who comes in with a ton of experience from the New England Patriots organization. And most recently with the Tennessee Titans front office, he was the assistant GM there. And he made the decision to go with Jonathan Gannon, somebody he identified when he knew he was going to get an opportunity at a general manager position. He was told to make a short list, and Jonathan Gannon was right there on the short list as far as potential head coaches. And so he goes with the Philly defensive coordinator as the new face of this organization. And it's really been kind of a message of, we're going to go with our guys over kind of the big name guys. And, JG brings in guys like a first-year offensive coordinator, Drew Petzing, comes over from the quarterbacks coach of the Cleveland Browns. And then he brings over Nick Rollis, who's the linebackers coach at 29 when he was hired as defensive coordinator. So a relatively, really young staff. And they kind of navigate. If you want to point out maybe some drama, it's this team kind of tearing down what the previous regime tried to build, and it was just kind of an epic failure. It was a team that went 4-13. It wasn't built for sustainable success. And I think that what Monty Ossenfort and Jonathan Gannon want to do is create a team that can be consistently in it and contending each and every year. And the Cardinals kind of had a cup of coffee here and there, went back to the playoffs in 2021, but it's like 4 years out of the playoffs, 1 year in the playoffs, and then rinse and repeat. So I think that this is a team that's going in the right direction. I think they have the right leadership to do so, and making the tough but probably necessary decisions to let guys like Zach Allen and interior defensive linemen walk and go get paid by the Denver Broncos for over $15 million per year, and a cornerback in Byron Murphy, who's Arizona native, who was a second-round pick of this team. He goes and signs a deal with the Minnesota Vikings, and the Cardinals just kind of let him walk. I think that those were unpopular decisions, but this team just trying to get back to neutral, get down to the studs, and figure out who they want to move forward with and really start to draft and develop the players that they're going to have for this team.
Okay, so common issue with just the last comment you made is that the Ravens are constantly going through a cycle where they need to let free agents go because they've had a lot of success in the draft. And it's a heartbreaking component of that kind of success that you have to let a lot of your players go. And that included trading players like Orlando Brown, Marquise Brown, Hayden Hurst, and others, and also letting them go in free agency. And they have a huge wave heading out at the end of this season. How much of the free agency for the Cardinals was really forced by their situation, and how much was a decision to, say, build cap for the future?
Yeah, building cap, creating, the ability to pivot any direction this upcoming offseason. I mean, they moved off of, they just cut DeAndre Hopkins, who, I think they maybe misdiagnosed what his market would be, and it just wasn't there. So they cut him, and they cut him basically a season earlier, because if they waited another day and it's June 1st, his contract's on the books another season. It's $11 million in 2023 and $11 million in 2024, and they just wanted to absorb that and potentially roll over any cap space that they could get. And they're going to have a significant amount of cap space to spend, almost too much to spend this offseason, because it's not a team that's going to eye free agency as a way to get better. They might find a guy like they did this offseason, Kazir White, who plays the inside linebacker, off linebacker spot for this team. And he's been a good signing, but they're very rarely going to say, hey, we're going to get better at this position through free agency. I think that they've got a sense that that's a bit fool's gold.
Well, I'm all for you on that. I hate going after free agents, but what I love is going after and signing your homegrown players after year 3 and potentially getting the discount there from the security that provides. Do the Cardinals have anyone in that position?
They're going to have to make a decision on Marquise Hollywood Brown. He's in the final year of his deal. They picked up his option, and he's making about $13 million this season. And he's having a fine year. Is he kind of a victim of bad quarterback play the last couple of weeks, probably from Joshua Dobbs? But I don't know if that's somebody. If Hollywood Brown's number gets too high, close to $20 million per season, if they'll even entertain that. They've got a lot of other glaring holes at other premium positions that maybe doesn't seem like he's a fit to come back. But yeah, not a whole lot of people right now, because they did really clean house. Like Isaiah Simmons, they didn't pick up his 5th-year option and then ended up shipping him out to the New York Giants for a 7th-round pick. The next guy that might be in place for an extension is about a year away, in Zaven Collins. And they moved him from off-ball linebacker to an edge rusher position. I think it boosts his value a little bit. He's been a little bit more productive, and obviously coming off the edge is a little bit more valuable in the NFL. And he might actually be in line for them to pick up his 5th-year option and then work out a multi-year extension. But there's really nobody. I mean, this is kind of a classic example of a new regime coming in, cleaning house, and really having a tough time identifying people that they want to move forward with.
All right. Well, let's move on to the quarterback situation, because that's obviously we did notice that Kyler Murray has practiced this week. Do you expect him to start this game against the Ravens?
No, I don't. It would be a miracle, actually. I mean, he's been primarily working out with practice squad, wide receivers, and tight ends. He was out there again today. So kind of week 2 is mirroring the start, how week 1 went for Kyler's return to the practice field from PUP. We talked to Joshua Dobbs in a spot that's, set up for the starting quarterback for that week's game. So he did his normal media availability, and Kyler Murray would have to dominate in practice as of today, tomorrow, and Friday, and really do something miraculous for them to pull the trigger and put him and activate him to be in the lineup against Baltimore come Sunday. But I think they don't want him to face Myles Garrett the next week. So probably a game in early November against the Atlanta Falcons in week 10 is the best time for Kyler Murray to come back. So looking at 2 more games of Joshua Dobbs starting at the quarterback position for Arizona.
Now, where is your hope for Kyler Murray long term? Is he? And I don't even know what year of his second contract he's on right now, right? But he has signed his second deal, right?
So he's on his 5th-year option right now, and then his huge contract extension that he signed before last season, which was 6 years, $230.5 million, starts to kick in next year. And it's going to be a big decision for this organization. Like, Kyler Murray is going to play games for this team, right? And is it going to be 7 or 8 games? That remains to be seen. But it's going to be enough for them to make a decision. Like, is this the guy we're going to move forward with? And they're going to have plenty of cap space regardless of what they do. If they decide to move forward with the contract, Kyler's going to kick in about $50 million towards the cap next season. Or if they decide to trade off of him, it's going to be about just over $46 million in dead cap space that they can take on in 2024 and go and probably pivot to a rookie quarterback contract, I would think. That scenario, Ken, I think, is if the Arizona Cardinals bottom out and they've got, one of the 2 top picks in this draft and are in just a great position to take either Caleb Williams or Drake May. But otherwise, I think they move forward. And I think that also is because Kyler Murray played them out of being in that position, because right now one win, they're picking second. If that stays the status quo, then I think that, Kyler didn't make his case well enough, and they move to a guy like Drake May out of North Carolina. All
right. Characteristic, just qualitatively in terms of his play, and also I guess maybe more importantly, because this has really been something that's kind of dogged him for the last couple of years in terms of his work habits and whatnot. Have you seen any changes there from Murray?
I mean, we've seen it ever since the new coaching staff came in, him really be embraced by them, and him kind of really embrace them back. And he's put in the work on and off the field as much as he, the word that they used to describe how he was approaching his rehab was he was attacking his rehab, and he's been chomping at the bit to come back. And everything that you want to hear about Kyler Murray and how he's approaching the game and how he's approaching his comeback is exactly what you want. You want to hear from your franchise quarterback that you just, signed to a huge extension like they did. But then, I think Jonathan Gannon maintains this with all his players. Like, you could really like the player and the guy in the classroom and the guy that you talk to, but it's going to be a different story when he hits the grass and when he's playing ball. And that's going to really be the final measuring stick of like what they're going to do with Kyler going forward. And if he can come out and he can, turn back the clock to kind of year 3 instead of what we saw in year 4 from him before he suffered the ACL injury on Monday Night Football against the Patriots, I think that the Cardinals have a fairly easy decision. They just move forward with him and they build around him, and they'll have the cap space to do so and the draft capital to do so.
All right. Josh Dobbs has the reins for now. Ravens fans remember him a little bit from his time, I guess, in Pittsburgh and maybe also in Cleveland as well. But what can you tell us about him?
Joshua Dobbs, rocket scientist, right? So, he's got it between the ears, right? He's a really, really smart kid. Not a whole lot of, this is the most he's ever played in his career. He held the clipboard for a long time behind Ben Roethlisberger and Mason Rudolph, and really never got an opportunity there in Pittsburgh outside of a cup of coffee, and then kind of emerged at the end of last season in Tennessee after Malik Willis kind of proved not to kind of be over his skis a little bit to the Titans, and they needed somebody to come in as they tried to chase a playoff spot, and it didn't work out. But, I think Dobbs showed at the time, Monty Osfort, who was there in Tennessee, that, he had a pretty good skill set. And, they talked to him this March, wanted to bring him in as kind of the guy, the bridge to Kyler Murray, and they couldn't work out a deal, and they were going to move forward with Colt McCoy, and McCoy just couldn't play. He had gone through several injuries last season, and his arm just wasn't where an NFL quarterback needed to be as far as arm strength to make the throws. And they ended up, once kind of DTR took over in Cleveland as the backup quarterback, that, made Dobbs available again. So they pulled the trigger on that deal. And, he's got good size. He's got decent arm strength. He's got the mobility that they want for this offense. The accuracy has been a big issue the last couple of weeks, Ken. Like, he went from somebody that I think surprised a lot of people and said, hey, man, we've been sleeping on Joshua Dobbs. Against week 2 against the Giants, he looked good. Week 3 against the Cowboys in a win, he looked really good. Even in a loss against the San Francisco 49ers, he looked solid. And it's like the league is adjusted, kind of made him a little panicky in the pocket, a little happy feet, and balls are kind of sailing on him. And he's missing, what most starting quarterback throws will make to Hollywood Brown, where he's beaten his man one-on-one and got separation. Dobbs has missed him. He's missed reads. He's missed and been inaccurate on throws, and it's really hindered this offense to where they got shut out in the second half against the Seattle Seahawks this last game, and it just hasn't been pretty offensive football under Dobbs, and he's gotten the trigger guy to that, and kind of the main reason for those struggles.
So you get a couple of AFC North teams who can legitimately play defense these next 2 weeks with Baltimore and Cleveland. Baltimore really known for playing a cover 2 shell this year, forcing every team they've faced to throw underneath. Has that been something Dobbs has been leaning on anyway, or has he been throwing the ball right down the field?
It's been kind of his Achilles heel the last couple of weeks. I asked him today. I was like, have you seen a drastic difference in how defenses are approaching you guys since the earlier success that you guys had? And he said, I wouldn't say drastic, but what just right out of your mouth, those cover 2 shells and making everything kind of stay underneath and not giving up those explosive pass plays. And it seemed to be working. It really has been working for opposing defense against Josh Dobbs and the Cardinals, and taking Hollywood Brown out of the equation, taking a nice 3rd-round receiver out of Stanford, Michael Wilson, out of the game plan last 3 weeks. And it's going to be up to them to kind of hit on some easy layup passes, maybe even hit on some ones where, they're not, maybe a little tighter windows, but you just got to see an uptick in accuracy from Dobbs. But, at this point, it would be kind of more bucking a trend than anything if he's able to figure it out, albeit at home against a pretty decent defense.
All right, well, let's move on to the offensive line. Always want to hear the state of that. Injury is obviously a big thing. Paris Campbell, want to obviously hear how he's doing, but take us through.
Yeah, the offensive line was a real bright spot for this team. I'd say up until the last couple weeks, they struggled against Seattle's defensive front, but they had it's been a really rock solid group and available group is what like the starting five. It started all the way up until last week together. Their left guard, who was probably the weakest link of the starters, Elijah Wilkinson, was out, and they had to bring in Dresden Cologne, who played the guard spot. He was okay. DJ Humphries he got tossed from that game, which really kind of screwed things up. And in the veteran, the highest paid offensive lineman, your left tackle, it was a rough game for them. So they're looking to bounce back. But for the most part, really surprising addition. And Yelda Froholt has been holding down the center position. He's been rock solid. He was a journeyman guy with Cleveland before this. Followed the offensive coordinator Petzing out here to the desert, and Will Hernandez, who struggled as kind of a draft darling, second rounder to the New York Giants to start his career, has really come out here and been one of their most reliable offensive linemen, playing the right guard spot. And you talk about Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State. Outside of, like last week was his worst game by far. He gives up a sack, gets penalized. He wasn't as efficient in the run game. But those two guys on the right side, they've been really rock solid in creating and bulldozing rush lanes for this offense. And they won't have James Conner, and they've got an undrafted rookie free agent, Amari Dermacado, who's still averaging 4.5 yards per carry. And it really starts on the right side of the line with those guys. And Paris Johnson's done a really good job in the run game. I think you want to see him a little bit better in pass pro, but kind of living up to 6th overall pick. So it's if you're looking at the Cardinals 2023 season as a whole, I think that one of the positives on their resume has been this offensive line.
Okay. All right. So for next year, who do they have that's still going to be around for sure? I mean, Tristan Cologne probably is a journeyman, but others.
Yeah. Froholt is under contract through 2024. I think that he's there potentially with a rookie behind him for the future of that position at center. Paris Johnson Jr., does he stay at right tackle, or does he switch over to left tackle? Do they use one of the 2 first-round picks that they have on some of these very impressive tackle prospects and really set up, bookend their tackle spot for the foreseeable future? That's a possibility. I think that Will Hernandez I think he's under contract through next season. So the right side is pretty much locked in. And then DJ Humphries, who I mentioned, most of his guaranteed dollars they run out this year. He's under contract. I think that somebody becomes a bit of a cap casualty, and they decide to either move Paris Johnson over to that spot or draft a franchise caliber left tackle in the draft.
Okay, I see you there. $9 million in savings next year if they cut Humphries. So that's about the position the Ravens are in with Ronnie Stanley next year. And hate. I just hate the idea of Ronnie going. We've always thought he'd be a Ring of Honor member, but sometimes injuries just catch up to you.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, let's start talking about the receivers. Wide receiver room. What does it look like?
Hollywood Brown has been a guy that's hungry to get paid this offseason. Like I said, a bit of a victim to the inaccuracies of the quarterback and Joshua Dobbs. And he's played through several injuries. He came into the season injured. He's dealing with a hamstring. He's dealing with an ankle. He's dealing with a thumb. He dealt with an illness. Just so many things have come Hollywood Brown's way, and I think he's responded very well. But, it's really going to come down to, do they want to pay him? But regardless of right now, I think he's playing at a pretty high level for the Cardinals. But then there's also, you've got Michael Thomas, who was a 3rd-round pick, who starred through training camp and kind of came out of the gates hot for this team and was playing really well and was trending, week in and week out the right direction. And it kind of hit a fever pitch where he had 2 touchdowns against the 49ers. And then since then, it's been, 7 catches for 107 yards the last 3 games. The productivity just fell off a cliff. So
With the busy fall season already in swing, you might be looking for wholesome, convenient meals for jam-packed days. Factor, America's #1 ready-to-eat meal kit, can help you fuel up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved, ready-to-eat meals delivered straight to your door. You'll save time, eat well, and stay on track with your healthy lifestyle. Guys, I've shared moving. I was using this for all my meals. Now I'm working from home. Guess what? Microwaves in the other room. I'm using this for all my meals. Factor is how I get through my lunch day every day. But they've got breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I haven't tried the breakfast ones yet, but why not? I think I might add that to my next order. But I love them for lunch. Plus, they've got new autumn fall flavors out right now for limited time, featuring seasonal veggies like cranberry, pecan chicken, and apple Dijon pork chops. And again, just like everything else, they're ready in just 2 minutes. They'll satisfy your fall cravings during this busy season without the hassle. So go ahead and level up with Gourmet Plus options as well. Prepared to perfection by chefs and ready to eat in record time. Treat yourself to upscale meals with premium ingredients like broccoli, leeks, truffle butter, and asparagus. Head to factormeals.com/Ravens50 and use the code Ravens50 to get 50% off. That's code Ravens50 at factormeals.com/Ravens50 to get 50% off your Factor meal today.
There's those two guys who I think are their top targets. And then you've got Rondell Moore, who's mixed into kind of the backfield a little bit. He's been playing a little slot, but in the past game, he hasn't been anybody that's made an impact at all. And then, outside of that, you're just kind of looking at, a Zach Pascal, who's primary special teams guy, who's kind of used as a blocker as well. And then you have a guy in Greg Dortch, who's more your kick return guy. So, outside of the top two players, pretty interchangeable parts. Wilson's really the only guy that's locked in for the foreseeable future.
So just hearing your comments on Brown and a question arising whether or not they want to pay him, the natural next question is he a potential trade deadline move if they want to acquire draft capital? Does that seem reasonable at this point for the Cardinals?
Yeah, I don't think that they're going to part ways with Hollywood. I think that they want him to be here for when Kyler comes back and potentially win some games. And make a decision on both of those guys and that they can complement each other a little bit. As far as the deadline goes, so like if you take Hollywood off the table, unless somebody comes over the top, there's really nobody. Like Ertz just went on IR. He would have been a candidate, but it would have been a pretty good scenario where I think that the organization would respect it. Like if he wanted to go somewhere, they would facilitate that. But otherwise, he probably just would have finished out the year here, likely retired. There just really isn't anybody. Like they really gutted this roster before the season began, and they were able to collect the draft capital and the assets that they needed to going into the 2024 offseason. So I don't think that they're still in asset accumulation mode any longer. I just don't think that they have anybody on the roster that anybody views as valuable and that will kind of outweigh, getting worse on the 2023 roster going forward.
All right, very good. I think Brown would be the guy, by the way. I think that there are teams that would covet him, and the wide receiver position seems to be tremendously overvalued generally in the NFL. Being a Ravens fan, having the Greg Roman offense here for years that was successful with 5 tight ends among the 5 eligible receivers at times it seemed was something that really facilitated Marquise Brown being traded out of Baltimore. But it'd be interesting. I think there's teams that would want him.
Yeah, teams have they've called on him. They just the Cardinals just didn't entertain any true offers on that. I think that they would have to be upwards of a 3rd round, 2nd round pick for Monty Ossenfort to really kind of look into it. And then it's just like, okay, you take Hollywood out of this offense. What are you left with? You got Michael Wilson, who you're encouraged by, but if you put the emphasis from a defense on him, what does he do? And then, you've got Greg Dortch, Rondell Moore. I just don't think that's enough. That would be a pretty egregious sign of a tank, even though, you're out there and you're adding, right now they've got 6 picks in the top 3 rounds. I think that they're pretty content with that.
All right. Very good. How about the tight end group and then the running backs?
Yeah, the tight end group took a hit with Zach Ertz, who looked really rusty coming back from an ACL injury. Looked every bit his age, and Father Time continues to be undefeated in the NFL. And Ertz they wanted to bend on him as he was kind of his former self, and struggled and had a quad injury after this week, and he's on IR. So now it's former second-round pick out of Colorado State, Trey McBride, who's shown flashes but not consistently been involved in the passing game, been more of a blocker. I think that they're going to need it. He's going to have to prove something to this new regime that, he was worth the 55th overall selection, and that he could be the former 1,000-yard receiver at Colorado State that he was at the NFL level. And then bunch of unknowns. I mean, they've got Blake Whiteheart, who was an undrafted free agent that they just elevated from the practice squad. And then they have Elijah Higgins, who is, I think, a 6th-round pick out of Stanford, converted wide receiver. So he's got the struggles of just kind of making that transition from the college level from a wide receiver to a tight end. And then they got a guy in Jeff Schwaim who played, decent downs for the Titans before, but I don't think he's a guy that anybody's going to rely upon in the passing attack. So tight ends, it's a group that's very inexperienced outside of Swaim and looking for Trey McBride to step up. And then the backs, without James Conner, it's the same story. It's like you got a second-year player in a Keontae Ingram who had an opportunity to kind of take hold of it, never did. And he kind of got surpassed by a guy, Amari Dermacado, who didn't even start at TCU last year behind Kendre Miller, who is now the Cardinals' lead back. He was primarily just kind of passing down, third down back. And now he's getting, probably I think they want to do a ceiling for his touches to about 15. He just doesn't seem like he's a bell cow guy. And then a veteran that they brought in off the streets, you'll recognize from the Chiefs run a couple of years ago, Damian Williams, who was on their practice squad, that I think they'll probably elevate another time this game day on Sunday.
Connor, the ex-Steeler, now with the Cardinals, having his best year by far. Talk a little bit about him for a second.
Yeah, he's really an interesting case because he's under contract one more year, but I would be shocked if he came back and he's playing under the same number. I think that there would be a restructure there. If you look at his age, 26, 27, that's an elder statesman as far as running backs go. And I think that this organization, if they had the ability, if the opportunity arose, they probably would have drafted the guy. But they just had so many needs, and just the way that the draft dominoes fell. There's an early run, 2 running backs in the first round, and a couple guys went in the second round. The opportunity never presented itself. I think of their draft capital, projects to be about 11 picks. I think that they'll probably get a young guy in here. But Connor's been great, man. I mean, as far as great locker room guy, I mean, what they miss him on the field more than you would think. He was having his best year, and you can see that just the playmaking ability that he provides when he's healthy. They severely miss it. Like Joshua Dobbs, I think, is probably the biggest victim of that. Like when he created that conflict of, are they going to run on any given down? What James Conner can do out of the backfield, what he does in pass pro. I think that Joshua Dobbs is severely missing him, and the Cardinals miss him overall. But I think he'll probably be back right around Kyler Murray when he's eligible off IR around week 10.
All right, very good. So this shocked me when I saw the statistic, but James Conner had 16 touchdowns 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Incredible.
I think he has 20. I think he has 28 in his Cardinals career, and he's only been here since 21. So
that can't be that far down the all-time Cardinal list. I mean, I would think it'd be in the top 25.
Yeah, no, it's up there. I mean, if you look at just total touchdown scorers, since 2021, only Austin Eckler has more than James Conner.
Wow. Okay. Great information on the offense. Any kind of particular personnel grouping that they start and end with? Do they play a lot of 12, a lot of 11, 21? What do they like to go with?
Yeah, there's a lot of 2 tight end sets, and that's what's going to be interesting without Ertz. Like, who's going to be that second tight end? Is it going to be Swaim? Are they going to try to really kind of at 1 and 6? Are they going to be a team that's going to try to develop guys and Higgins and Blake Whiteheart, who's now on the active roster? But a lot of Trey McBride and really trying to set themselves up for success in the run game. So I think that's what you'll see. But not much, nothing too exotic. I mean, sometimes it's like early downs, they look a lot like kind of a Cleveland, a San Francisco, and then on third down passing downs, they look a lot like Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. All right. All right. Very good. I think the big thing from the Ravens this year has been kind of a perceived weakness at cornerback. A lot of that's gone away with Marlon Humphrey's return, Brandon Stevens' emergence as a pretty darn good corner. They've sat some guys, frankly, who were very productive for them early in the year while they were out. But they've got Arthur Mollett might be a little bit of a weakness at slot corner that other teams, I think, can take advantage of. How do you expect the Cardinals to attack the Ravens defense?
Yeah, I think that they are going to try to get Hollywood Brown involved. That seems to be the game plan as of late. And it worked early against the Cincinnati Bengals in the first half, and they were hitting for big, explosive plays with Hollywood there, and really get Michael Wilson involved in this game. I would imagine that's the game plan. Or can the Ravens take them out of it? That's what opposing defenses have been able to do the last couple of weeks, and the Cardinals, all they can do is to combat it is try to establish a run game, and it just hasn't been working. So, if with their best set plans, that's what they want to do. But I think that the way that this offense is trending, like, they have to buck a couple trends themselves to make some plays against this Ravens defense, and I think that they'll try to do it via Hollywood Brown and Michael Wilson, but it hasn't worked the last couple of weeks.
All right, very good. Let's flip it over to the defense. One thing I always like to start with is kind of what's their favorite look on passing downs in terms of both the package. Do they go to a dime? What do they do in terms of personnel and in terms of alignment?
Yeah, I talked to Jonathan Gannon today, and he was because I've noticed just throughout his tenure, like, they drafted this third-round rookie corner out of Syracuse, and Garrett Williams, who I think they benefited from him having a knee injury against Notre Dame last year and wasn't ready. He made his debut last week, first game, first pick, and he played 22 of his 26 snaps in the slot. And I asked Gannon, how have you seen the evolution of the slot? The nickel corner, it used to be just kind of a backup corner. You had some coverage skills, and he views it. He said, look, I view that as a starting position. He really likes to get in these nickel, these dime, these penny looks. And he likes to have, any time, 5 to 6 corners on the field.
Let me go back to penny for a second. This has always pissed me off about how defenses are named because it breaks the coinage rules. But a penny, as you say, it is 5 defensive backs, 3 down linemen, 1 inside linebacker.
Yeah, the one off ball linebacker. Yeah, and it's usually because you're white. But they're going to get Jalen Thompson back, who's a really rock solid, underrated safety in this league. He's been playing in the slot a little bit for this team this season. He's been out the last 2 weeks with a hamstring issue, and you had Budda Baker, who was on the IR until last week, come back. Really great safety, playmaking safety there. And then Garrett Williams, who's been playing inside. So really, like, probably their most rock solid unit. It's going to be the first time you're going to see full personnel this year. And they'll be on the field probably to start the game and for the bulk of the game, those 3 players right there. And they'll rotate in Andre Sauchere, who played primary teams for Philadelphia, but a little experience in Gannon and Rollis's defense. But you'll see those 3 safeties basically out there, or 2 safeties in a slot, and then 2 outside corners. Marco Wilson's had a brutal year. He's a third-year corner out of Florida, and then right now it's a rookie in Starling Thomas. He's taken over starting position over Keitrell Clark, who's a 6th-round pick that started early on and looked good and just kind of fell off a cliff.
Are they a committed nickel team that has the weak side linebacker on the field all 3 downs, or do they rotate there with a dime back?
They'll usually rotate in with the linebacker there, or with the linebacker on the field at all times. So you got Kazir White, and they'll usually bring in a Josh Woods to play that other linebacker spot for the Arizona Cardinals.
All right, very good. Take us through the defensive line. One of the questions I always have about the DL is what kind of usage are they getting in terms of snap count management and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, that's really, like, when you look at the management and a really heavy rotation, and I don't think it's a product of not having any big names in that spot either. I think that they would do it if they had a couple of blue chip, first, high draft picks and some big money players playing that position, like JG had in Philly, like where he had Fletcher Cox and Dominican Sue and Jordan Davis, like just a huge deep rotation. Where here it's the exact opposite, but still the same scheme, right? Nick Rallis likes, sometimes you're seeing 2 defensive linemen in there, sometimes you're seeing 3, and then they've got the 2 edge rushers, like that. The front 7 is just is a rotation at all times, and you're seeing guys, if somebody breaks 50%, that's a huge snap load for them in that game. So we're seeing no-name guys from Lecky Fotu, who's been here, to Kevin Strong Jr., who comes over from Tennessee, Dante Stills, who was a 7th-round pick out of West Virginia, play in the interior of this defensive line. And then they're about 6 deep as far as the pass rush outside linebacker spot. Zaven Collins made that position change from off-ball linebacker to edge rusher.
Do they rotate in then edge I'm sorry, do they kick inside edges to eat up DL snaps on passing downs?
Yeah, sometimes they will. And some, there's a few occasions, Ken, where they don't even have a true defensive lineman on the field. Mm-hmm. Like we'll see maybe a heavier set edge rusher in the middle of the defense, and then they've got two edge rushers bumped out. And that's a look that they'll give on a passing down where they can kind of pin their ears back. But yeah, they give, a bunch of looks at you defensively. They try to really use the diversity of their pass rush group and take advantage of it from which opposing office they're facing.
4 years ago now, and those were some really great years, obviously in 2019, but the Ravens had the lead the whole year effectively, and they only played 10.2% base defense for the whole year, and they played 13% of the time with 4 outside linebackers on the field. And it's just incredible. This race car, as I call them, or NASCAR packages, whatever you want to call them, can be very effective when you have opportunity. There's definitely a lot of fun to watch. All right. Any other players on defense? You took us through the secondary. We talked a little bit. Don't think we talked about off-ball linebackers, did we?
Kazir White is a guy that came over from Philadelphia. He's been their best defensive player, most consistent, no doubt about it. A pick here, a couple sacks here, a couple TFLs. He's been the guy that they can really rely upon, that can kind of be the coach out there on the field for this team. And then Collins has been good. Victor Dumakagi's been solid in the pass rush. And then Dennis Gardeck, who also stars on special teams, has been one of their best pass rushers. Pretty versatile. He can drop back in coverage, and he can also got a pretty good skill set as far as a pass rusher.
All right. Very good. Yeah. Any ideas on how they'll try and align maybe differently to defend the Ravens' set of offensive weapons? Obviously, the biggest one being Lamar Jackson. Do you expect a spy, or do you expect? Yeah. What do they do?
I wouldn't be surprised if they deployed 2 spies at some point. As far as Lamar Jackson and what teams have been doing against to try to take away the run against Chicago when Fields was healthy. I really wouldn't doubt that. But, obviously you've got the 3 safeties, or the bigger defensive backs that I guess more equipped to get a guy like Lamar Jackson on the ground. But no, I mean, it's really going to be interesting. They haven't been cut up too bad from mobile quarterbacks. They haven't faced too many mobile quarterbacks either this season. So it's going to be an interesting challenge for Jonathan Gannon and Nick Rallis as far as going up against Lamar Jackson. And if Jackson is just put in a position where he needs to beat him with his arm, if he can continue, maybe parlay a couple good games like that together, it would be crushing for the Cardinals.
All right. I don't like to do score predictions. I always hate it when people ask me, and I'm on this show. So how about just give me a player on each side of the ball you think matches up pretty well against the Ravens?
Man, matchup wise, I mean, offensively, the Cardinals have been going in such a wrong direction. If they're going to get right, I think it is Hollywood Brown, and obviously facing his former team, I think that's a guy that it just signs point to him. He needs to have a big game, and if he does, it seems to go the right direction for the Cardinals. They need to get back to protecting Joshua Dobbs as well. So you come down to key matchups that offensive line has to have a rock solid game, especially coming off protecting slowing down edge pressure against Dobbs. And then on the defensive side of the football, I mean, it is going to come down to, I think, a Kazir White, somebody that's going to be tasked with not letting Lamar Jackson make those big game-breaking plays with his legs. And that's easier said than done. But if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be in the form of either a Kazir White or a Buda Baker. And I know it's going chalk as far as their most important defenders, but when you go up against a guy like that, you need your star players to play like stars.
All right. Outstanding stuff, Bo. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
Yeah, we're live every day, 4:30 Pacific, 7:30 Eastern, talking Cardinals football, PHNX Sports on YouTube. You can find us wherever you find podcasts. Appreciate it if you leave a 5-star review or rating and review. That goes a long way. But also you can just follow me at Bo Brock on Twitter.
All right. Outstanding. So when I promo the show, if you would, please respond with where they can find any kind of preview show you have for the game, because I know a lot of Ravens fans like to go out and find that for opposing teams.
Perfect. I sure will.
Other folks out there, if you'd like to be on a Film Study short, hit me up with a DM on Twitter. They're always open. I'm always looking for new topics to talk with passionate fans about. I'll get back to you very quickly. I promise you that. Bo, thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Ken.
And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.